Leviticus 11 is a powerful chapter in the Bible. In verse 2 it reads, "Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, These are the beasts which ye shall eat among all the beasts that are on the earth." It goes on to mention the camel, the coonie, which is a rabbit, the hare, the swine, and it says, "They are unclean to you." Leviticus 11 is a powerful chapter. Hello, I'm Rico Hill, the host of From Sickness to Health, and this is... Whoa, you all right?
Yeah, I'm just feeling a little sick.
Ah, well, okay, wait a minute. You go by the name Sickness and you're feeling sick?
Yeah, so?
Just saying the irony, right?
Something I ate went down the wrong way.
Okay, say that. Let me get you some water, all right?
No, I already tried that.
All right, let's try this, Oh, here you go. Ready? 1, 2. Oh, man, what is that?
That was dinner.
That's shrimp. That's unclean food, man. You're eating unclean food.
Oh, it is not unclean. I washed him thoroughly.
Oh, man, you need to read Leviticus 11.
I don't want to hear it. I love shrimp, lobster, crab, anything creepy crawly.
All right, fine. If you haven't guessed already, today's topic is clean and unclean food. Roll it.
Hey, which way did it go?
I ran off over there somewhere.
Ran off?
Roll it. Hello, and thank you for joining us here in the studio of From Sickness to Health. You know me, I'm Rico Hill, but today I have someone you may not have met, but you are going to be happy that you met him because he's going to share some wonderful information with us. It is our good friend, Dr. Milton Mills, who is a physician, and he is part of the critical care unit of the United Medical Center in Washington, D.C. That's my hometown. He is the Associate Director of Preventive Medicine, and that is for the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. That means that he's going around lecturing. Not only is he caring for patients, but he's also educating them, and that's a big part of what we do here on From Sickness to Health, because we want to see you go from sickness to health. Welcome to the program, Dr. Mills.
I'm happy to be here, Rico.
You know, we're talking about something today that a lot of people, they read their Bibles, they have studied things, but they miss this point. And we're talking about clean and unclean foods, or clean and unclean meats, to be more specific. And today, we're going to break this whole thing down. We're going to get rid of the myths and the misconceptions. We're going to get to what not only the science says, what a good, responsible, preventative physician would say, but we're going to look at what God says as well, as we always do. So hang around. We're going to take a look at what our friend Sickness has to say about it, because we want to be balanced, don't we? So let's see what Sickness has to say about this subject.
Thank you, Rico. I'm preparing an exquisite dinner tonight for some of my frenemies, a group of health nuts. They only eat clean and local, organic, I don't even know. It's kind of annoying, to be honest. Vegans and vegetarians, they annoy me a lot. So anyway, I'm trying to be creative. It's much harder to be sick when you're vegetarian, so I've got to do some things that I would not otherwise do. I'm going to make some greens, which is good for you, but I'm going to add in a little bit of pig feet for flavor, which is nice. And also, I'm going to add some shrimp and some lobster. That's going to be great. And then last but not least, I'm making some vegetarian rice patties, but I'm using crab sauce for flavor. It's going to be great. You know, vegetarians, they think they're pretty smart, but not all of them read the labels. That's how I get them. Lard, that's a great one. You know, lard is pork fat. Not a lot of people know that. Sneaky, I know. So anyway, that's what I do. I've sent out invitations to all my health nut friends. They're coming expecting this great meal, and I'm going to make sure it's amazing. You know, one last ingredient I had to consider. is you got to make sure some of these guys are technically not unclean. So I'm going to scrub them down real nice. Back to you, Rico.
So, shrimp, lobster, lard. So let's start out by what's the book of Leviticus. The book of Leviticus tells us that there are some issues. God says there's an issue with eating certain foods. He deems them unclean to us, as we saw in the opening of the program. But let's hear from you. What's wrong with lobster? What's wrong with shrimp? What's wrong with pork?
Okay. Well, first of all, as a physician, I just have to point out that that chapter in Leviticus makes it clear that God actually wanted the Israelites to be plant eaters, but they demanded meat. And that upset him because that wasn't his original plan. Genesis makes it clear that he designed us to be pure plant eaters. When he brought them out of Egypt, he fed them only with manna, which Psalm 78 describes as being the corn of heaven.
Angels' food.
Angels' food, absolutely. But the Israelites demanded flesh because they were so addicted to eating animal flesh from the time that they spent in Egypt. And you can maybe at some point do another program on why eating animal flesh is so addictive, but that's for another time. But they were addicted to it, so God said, okay, fine. If you're going to eat it, there are certain types that you can eat, but other types you can never touch.
Under no circumstances.
Under no circumstances. And so he gave them a list of the clean and the unclean.
But wait a minute now. That's the law of Moses that's found in, the Old Testament, and that's what people would say.
No, that's not true. The concept of clean versus unclean existed from the very beginning because Noah took the clean animals into the ark by sevens, and the unclean he only took in by twos. And that was because, one, the clean animals were to be used both for sacrifice and temporarily for food because all of the vegetation was going to be destroyed post-flood and need time to regenerate. But the unclean were never to be eaten.
Oh, wait. So there was a specific purpose for the unclean ones. So there must have been, because God said, take them onto the boat.
Right.
So there must have been. So what is the purpose? If we're not supposed to eat them, what are we supposed to do with the shrimp and the lobster and the crab? People love their crab. You're from the Maryland area. They say, crab lovers is Maryland, right?
Right. They are designed to clean up the environment. Any dead thing that floats to the bottom of the ocean, lobster will immediately gravitate towards that dead whatever it is and begin to eat it. And they essentially clean it up by ingesting it. That's their job. Mussels and clams will actually filter waste material out of the water. You can actually take raw sewage and pass it over a bed of oysters and mussels, and it will come out crystal clear at the other end. Why? Because they actually filter all of that organic material out of the water and they consume it. That's their job. That's what they're designed to do. They do it very well. But if you then turn around and ingest their tissues, you are in essence eating fecal material, which is disgusting.
When you said raw sewage, that's what you were talking about.
That's exactly what I'm talking
So
about.
we find now that a lot of the sewage, for whatever reason, is finding its way into our waterways. Isn't that correct?
And so that's exactly what our sewage treatment plants do. They take the raw sewage we flush down our toilets, emulsify it, and it goes out into the waterways. The shellfish actually take that stuff, they consume it, clear the water, and they actually incorporate the sewage into their tissues. That's what they're designed to do. That is the way God designed them to clean the environment.
So God had a design to actually clean our waterways so that they would be safe.
Absolutely.
But we find that he also had a design how to clean the land.
Yes.
We're talking about the swine or the pork, pigs. They were the land animals. They were part of those 2 by 2 that were taken onto the ark, and their job was to clean up all the mess, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Let's see if...
And yes, it is.
And yes, it is. Still, currently, right?
Yes.
So let's see. Let's take a look at this news clip, and maybe we can get some further insights. Was God right? Let's see.
Sure.
A big Consumer Reports study found a high rate of contamination in pork chops and ground pork from a kind of bacteria that can send you to the emergency room. ABC's Dr. Richard Besser brings us the whole picture.
You don't know its name, but you may be one of the 100,000 Americans who get sick each year from a bacteria called Yersinia. And today's study explains why. Consumer Reports tested pork, the types you'd buy in the supermarket, including pork chops and ground pork. They found that nearly 70% of the samples they tested had the dangerous bacteria Yersinia on them. Ground pork turned out to be even more risky than pork chops.
This should be a wake-up call to the American public. What are we doing in terms of monitoring the safety of pork, and what can we do in the future?
Wow. You know, something that stood out to me about that clip, Doctor, is that you heard the response from the woman. She said, we have to do something to monitor the safety of, what can we do to make it more safe, basically is what she was saying. But when you're seeing numbers like 68% of like some of the pork chop, the chops, and 74% of the ground pork having this bacteria, Yersinia, and it's causing all these health issues. I mean, it's a waste of time, isn't it? Because God has said you can't eat it. Let's talk about the pig.
He said, don't touch it. And it's amazing to me that the response of the sort of health department is, well, this stuff is loaded with dangerous bacteria, so let's try and monitor the food to try and catch it before it kills. I mean, that's crazy. We shouldn't be eating it in the first place. This stuff is riven with these very dangerous types of bacteria. Furthermore, the trichina worm that everybody knows about is still present in pork, which is why it is always recommended that you cook pork to very high temperatures in order to kill it. Now, in this country, we don't see a lot of the problem that comes from eating undercooked pork, which is a brain infection called cysticercosis, which is where people get these cysts in their brains, which can cause seizures and in certain cases even death. But we do see it from in people coming from other countries like Mexico and certain Latin American countries.
And I just jump in for a second. I was with one of my doctor friends this past weekend, and we were talking about the trichina worm, the trichinosis that finds its way into people's bodies and even lodges in their brains. And
Right.
we actually show a clip ordinarily, but we're not going to show you that one. It would be too much for you to handle. But we have an operation of someone actually having, they thought the woman had a brain tumor, only to go in and they found the worm. It had grown to a couple of inches
Right.
in size, and they had to remove it, and it was still alive. This is the thing. But the cysticercosis you're talking about, this doctor shared with us this past weekend that there's almost 90% of his surgeries, they're seeing it in his patients.
Right.
So it's
Right.
it's happening. This is becoming
Yes.
pervasive.
Right. This is still very prevalent. So it's the trichina worm, it's the Yersinia, and then, there's this campaign in the pork industry to try and pass pork off as white meat. They say pork, the other white meat. That's
marketing, isn't it?
Yeah, that is marketing because it's an absolute lie. The leanest cuts of pork you can buy are still over 50% fat by calories. So pork is extremely high in fat, and that is very unhealthy. It will raise your risk for heart disease, number of cancers, and other health problems, as well as dealing with all of these infections that we're talking about. So again, God said don't touch it. He knew what he was talking about because this is very unhealthy food.
Okay, let's make this very practical, because in a lot of communities, certainly in our community, I mean, we come from, and I mean, you're working in the same place where I grew up, so we have a large African-American community,
Absolutely.
we have a large Hispanic community in our cities, and some of the foods that we just love, absolutely tied to tradition, is soul food. And in soul food, we're talking about fried foods, fried this, fried that. But let's break it down. Let's be very practical, because people are hearing this and they're saying, are they talking about my food? Well, we talked about shrimp. We talked about crab lovers, very toxic. We're talking about lobster. We won't find that as much, but still we have our version, the shrimp version, tiny version of the lobster. But we're talking about pork in all of its form, bacon, ham, talking about what else? Ham,
chitlins, neck bones, oxtails.
I didn't want to go there, but we just went there. Chitlins, but it's something, it's real.
Right.
And this, we're talking about the intestines, the pig intestines. And this is something that coming up, you know, in months to come, we're going to see lots of it for New Year's and all these different holidays. People bring out the chitlins, and we're talking about something that is so dangerous for us to eat.
Absolutely. First of all, it's not soul food, it's plantation food. Because West Africans don't eat this way. Traditional West Africans did not include these kinds of foods in their diet.
And the reason why you're saying West Africans is because most African Americans who have come here came from the Western
West Africa.
part.
That's where the slaves were obtained.
But that's not their diet, you're
That's
saying.
not their traditional diet. What happened was, when these West Africans were brought to the American plantations, they were literally forced to eat the garbage of the plantation. So that's why they were forced to eat the entrails of the pig's feet, its ears, its tails, the cow's neck bones, the cow's tail. All of these things were the things that they would ordinarily throw away, but instead of throwing them away, they fed them to the slaves. Unfortunately, when the slaves were freed, they turned around and owned what is essentially a dietary vestige of slavery. And we know that these foods are higher in cholesterol, higher in fat, cause excess rates of disease, and are very unhealthy. And we need to reject these foods and get back to what is our true dietary heritage, and that is a low-fat, plant-based diet that does not include these very unhealthy dietary echoes of slavery past.
Now, you know, some would say, well, it tastes so good. First of all, it tastes, we've been eating it for years, and, you know, let me just play the advocate here.
Sure.
They'll say, well, you know, we've been eating this way for years.
Right.
Grandma ate this way,
Right.
and she lived to be 85 years old.
And
but what was wrong with Grandma up to 85?
That's exactly right. Grandma couldn't walk. She, you know, had diabetes. She had heart disease. She probably had cataracts. And my point is, if she lived to be 85 abusing herself, she probably would have lived to be 105 if she had taken care of herself. The other point is this. Nobody asked for fried chicken or pork chop or chitlins in the delivery room. Everything we think we like, we had to learn to like. Babies are born without preferences. They have to be taught to like these unhealthy foods. And just like we learned to like unhealthy things, we can unlearn those bad habits and learn to like things that are good for us and that actually promote and preserve our health as opposed to destroying it.
Perfect, perfect. You know what? As always, we want to not only hear what you have to say, we've heard the side of sickness where he gives his point of view, you know, sort of in a provocative way to stimulate the conversation. We looked at the news clip and we've seen, you know, that in the news clip, it's clear. God said, don't touch it. And we're seeing that it has dangerous bacteria. So let's take a look at what people are saying on the streets.
Sure.
Because that's going to be important for our conversation. And I think our audience needs to hear
Absolutely.
what they think, because other people in the street are saying the same thing. So let's take a look.
All right, I'm here with my man, Mark. Mark, what do you think about, you ever heard that discussion on clean and unclean food?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, he knows what he's talking about. All right, so let's talk about lobster. You ever heard of lobster?
Oh, yeah.
You like lobster?
Yeah.
What do you like about it?
Oh, first look of it, it's nice to taste. especially a lobster tail.
Mmm,
Brown butter.
Oh, man. Man, you make me want to eat some lobster right now. Oh, what about shrimp and jumbo shrimp and
Shrimp cocktail.
pickled shrimp,
Fried
shrimp cocktail?
Coconut shrimp.
I don't like shrimp, I like scrimp.
There we
I can
go.
do scrimp. I can do it grilled, I can do it sauteed. There's a whole lot of different shrimp.
Scrimp, right here. Good stuff. So here's the argument. Some people say that lobsters are unclean. What would you say to that person?
Lobster is delicious.
Lobster is delicious? I love this lady.
I don't know.
He doesn't know, that's okay. Lobster, what do you think of lobster?
Awesome, tasty.
Awesome, tasty. What do you think about this whole debate with religious people and a lot of groups in the world, clean and unclean foods? You ever heard that argument?
I heard the clean and unclean foods, but not associated with religious groups.
Well, all right, when you say clean foods and unclean, give me an example of what people call unclean food.
Oh, anything that's taken out of its processed foods.
Yeah, exactly. So if I take a lobster and I wash it, it's clean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's clean. That's exactly right. Rico, the unclean meat eaters have spoken. Back to you.
There you have it. They don't know.
No.
They don't know. They are, you know, they're walking blindly in a world where God is trying to keep us on a narrow path of health, but anything and everything is out there for consumption, and yet it's making us sick, isn't it, doctor?
Yes, it is. You know, when my patients tell me, oh, I love shrimp, I explain to them and say, you know, a shrimp is just a big ocean-going cockroach.
What?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It does in the ocean what cockroaches do on land. It runs around eating all the garbage.
Scavengers.
That's exactly right.
So
and that's what it's designed to do, and it does it very well. But if you wouldn't dare touch a cockroach on land, why do you want to eat one from the ocean?
I don't even want to think about it.
Exactly.
Now, you know, what comes to my mind, to bring it back to God and his design and his purpose. What was God's purpose? I think that's where we need to start to go, because when I consider that God had a purpose for these animals, for these creatures, he has a purpose for our bodies. In fact, I'm reminded of Psalm 100 and verse 3. It says, "Know ye not that the Lord, he is God? It is he that hath made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture."
Amen.
Psalm 100 verse 3. So God wants us to know that he made us. And he goes even further and says, you didn't make yourself. So if God knows us and he made us, he should know what will happen when we put things into our body. Not unlike the shrimp, the crab, the clams, the oysters. When we put them into our body, they're toxic, and he knew it, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
And also, I read earlier that, we talked about earlier, how God designed this body for a plant-based diet, and then there was an emergency diet that God brought in, and it was flesh foods. But he says the blood, it's going to require your lives. Now, you know what I've heard, doctor? When sharing that information, you know what people say? Well, I am a New Testament Christian. All those things don't matter to me because you brought those from the Old Testament. Now, what's wrong with blood? And then I like to take a look at Scripture. What's the problem with the blood of animals?
Well, first of all, it's full of iron. And again,
that's not a bad thing. We need iron, right?
No, not a lot of it. Because science is now telling us that excess iron promotes disease. It promotes cancer. It promotes infection. It promotes autoimmune diseases. When you get too much iron, it causes disease. Because iron is like a match. It's a catalyst. It would be like having boxes and boxes of matches stored in your living room. You wouldn't dare do that. Yeah, you want to have maybe a box of matches to light your fireplace, but you wouldn't want matches stacked up to the rafters because it will start a fire eventually.
Oh,
and the
that's
same
beautiful.
thing happens in your body when you have too much iron. It causes runaway inflammatory disease.
Inflammation.
Yes.
Which is a precursor to scar tissuing.
Well, and to all sorts of conditions: heart disease, cancer, infection. autoimmune problems.
So all these things are going to lead to dangerous lifestyle diseases
and premature death.
Whoa. Now, I want to read something from the book of Acts, chapter 15 and verse 20, for those who would say, wait, that's Old Testament. Then I'll allow you to comment. It says here in Acts chapter 15 and verse 20, it says, but that we write unto them that they abstain from pollutions of idols, and from fornication, and from things strangled, and from blood. So that excessive iron that you're talking about, God knew it. He said it's too much.
Absolutely.
And it will lead to dangerous lifestyle diseases, but also protein that is found in the meats and in the tissue. And talk about that a little bit before we run out of time. We've got just about a minute and a half.
Sure. Animal protein has been shown over and over again to raise levels of what we know, hormones that are called IGF-1, IGF-2, which stands for insulin-like growth factor 1 and 2. The higher the levels of these of IGF-1 and 2 in your body, the greater your risk of developing various types of cancer, also of developing diabetes, and a number of other inflammatory conditions that, again, lead to disease. So, again, animal protein is actually toxic to our system, whereas plant proteins actually are very beneficial to our system. Animal proteins tend to promote atherosclerosis. Plant proteins don't. Plant proteins actually benefit our immune system. Animal proteins tend to regulate your immune system, and that's not a good thing because your immune system is your police force. It's what guards your body against infection, guards your body against tumor formation. You need a healthy, robust immune system.
Whoa. I tell you, you know what? It just sort of opens my mind up to, you mentioned diabetes. We're going to have you back and come back and talk about diabetes in this context. This has been a fascinating discussion with Dr. Milton Mills as we've been talking about clean and unclean meats, but also the blood that's in meat and why we love it so much. Now, this has been a greater context for you, I hope, in terms of seeing the things that's in your own family, the cancer, the diabetes. But we're going to come back and we're going to talk about this some more. So tune in the next time on From Sickness to Health. Thank you, Dr. Milton Mills. We appreciate it. And we'll see you again. I remember when eating clean and unclean foods became very, very real to our family. We were just eating the things that we loved and we weren't really thinking about it. We didn't care. We didn't know any better. We just was enjoying our food. It tastes great, so what was the problem? But there was this time, I was about 8 years old, and we had a certain pork item, and the entire family, all 8 of us, became so incredibly sick. I have not had pork since that day. Now, today we have shared with you that which is clean and that which is unclean.
Hey, yeah, but what about bacon? What about bacon?
If it comes from a pig, it's unclean.
Yeah, but it tastes so good.
It's not about taste. It's about what the Word of God says.
See, that's where you got this old Leviticus and Old Testament stuff totally wrong. When people are offered a BLT, you can't resist it. Gumbo, shrimp, lobster, all in one.
Look.
People are going to eat what they're going to eat.
And we are going to keep informing them about what is good, what is healthy, and that which will do you the best.
What about barbecue snake chops?
It's what? It's out.
Yeah, no, you put it on the grill, the fire seems to somehow eliminate all the parasites.
No, it's unclean. It's unclean.
How about tofu and armadillo?
Armadillo?
Well, see, the tofu balances out the leprosy in the armadillo.
You know what? Now you're just being silly. Here's the thing. The laws of health are like any other laws. If they're broken, there are consequences. The psalmist David says, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Look, God did not give us the book of Leviticus for a bunch of restrictions and rules. He did it because he loves us and he wants us to be healthy.
It's rules and restrictions.
Anyway, that's our program for today. I leave you with this. 3 John 2, Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health,